It's the 16th of February 2022 in Durnford, who are the best show on the planet. You have a good day today. It's a great day to be alive on this planet. Let's get into it. We can't. There's not enough hours in the day. And all I do is nuclear. The industry is crazy. She's batshit crazy, the whole bloody industry. We've never caught them telling the truth. Try wrapping your mind around that one. We've never caught them telling the truth. Some sad news today. They tricked a few people into going back to a nuclear wasteland known as Fukushima. It's just a couple kilometers from nuclear meltdowns that are still... That's the gallows laugh, because it's just seems surreal that there's people who would do that to other people. We got a poll tonight. Fukushima, they're letting people go back in, but 90% of Fukushima is too radioactive to cross the street or live in it. And so is the 10% left actually safe to live in? And the right answer is no, because it's like, it's, in one sense, it's just bizarre. So imagine if you got a cyanide, you got an acre of land, and it's got 10 feet, 20 feet of cyanide on it. And you're going to go in and dig out a little section and scrape it out and get rid of the cyanide. And then you're going to move your family in that little tiny section and live a normal everyday life. At the same time, there's a factory on the outskirts that is hemorrhaging cyanide dust aerosols into the environment. So it's really hard to understand radiation. It's really hard to understand how anybody can have two Danas on their screen. Last Fukushima town to reopen. Just because the other ones opened, not all of them. A lot of the towns that they reopened, you can only go to 10, 20, 30% of the communities. Like this one here is still closed, this community. You can't go to that supermarket. And that's about 40 kilometers away from the nuclear meltdown. But 2 kilometers from the nuclear meltdown, 3 people have moved back to a nuclear wasteland known as Fukushima, which aims, even though, like, and this is not the mayor moved back or politicians moved back or government employees moved back. No, this is people who don't know any better moved back. Like the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society that descend to the nuclear meltdowns. So there's just a couple kilometers away, there's reactor 1. And they put a Kevlar sarcophagus. You can see how big the panels are. Look how big those panels are. They just get laid on the frame. The frame was built off-site and laid there with cranes and what they call disposable people who can only work 1 or 2 hours, and then they're given them $50 or something, and they go away and die. And for many years, that's the way they done it. Chernobyl went through 600,000 people that way. So they lay these big panels. Look at that panel. And it just hooks by gravity. Everything's by gravity. And they do use some people, but it's always going to be homeless. Because it's a... Now that Kevlar sarcophagus, so to speak, was temporary. They completely removed it. But it's sat there for 5 years. Unit 2, and you can see a heat signature in the top right-hand corner. The whole building is just boiling, obviously. was 100% liquefaction of the uranium cores. And they've never seen it before in the history of nuclear power. So, number one, the fuel pools at the top of the buildings detonated. And I can probably find that. Yeah, that's reactor 1 going to detonate. See the detonation? Let's do that again. This is reactor 1, when I was just showing you detonating. It's an incredible detonation. And they put a sarcophagus around it because it burnt continuously for several days. And it lost its fuel pool, which was decades of reactor cores at the top of the building. You've seen in the explosion. And it lost its reactor core. It actually went China syndrome down into the earth and hit the water table at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And that, when it hit the water, what happens is a liter of water expands around 1,500 feet in a split second. So you can imagine hundreds and hundreds of tons of 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature uranium liquefied core hitting the water table at one time. It split the earth in many places, 100 feet above it, because they built it 100 feet. They come in and laid a foundation 100 feet up above an old riverbed. This is on purpose so that if it does melt down, it hits the riverbed, and the underground river that's millions of years old, the water continues to run out towards the ocean down the gravity-fed hill, and that washes and cools down the reactor and washes the material out into the ocean. But it also caused liquefaction on the actual site itself. And so reactor 2 completely liquefied, the same thing, but it also burned continuously for several days. And these 190-foot buildings with, because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, right? And so it's the same thing, 100% lost of the fuel pools, which is decades of reactor cores, and the actual reactor cores, which was 800 tons. Chernobyl was a 200 ton, was graphite. This is reactor 3. This was mixed oxide fuel. And the significance of that is that the toxins, the emitters, the radiation from these, like reactor 2 and reactor 1, are 1 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. But reactor 3 and the fuel pools again are at the very top of the buildings in those depictions up there. And this was what they known as mixed oxide fuel, where they reclaim uranium and plutonium from nuclear missiles or nuclear fuel. In this case, the fuel was sent, the reactor cores were sent, that were used, were sent to United Kingdom and also France, La Hague, and Sellafield in the United Kingdom, where it's reprocessed, it's reclaimed the hot particles rather than trying to store it for billions of years. The cowards reclaim it and burn it again. And the emissions from that are lethal beyond conceivable. So the original after a chain reaction is 1 billion times more toxic industrial poison. Now it's 1 billion times 1 billion more toxic, or 2 billion times more toxic, times 1 billion. And so they lost all the fuel pools, which is decades of reactor cores. And Chernobyl didn't have that facet. It was a new reactor. And it's completely gone. The reactor cores is completely gone. Now that explosion, I got it. The buildings are 190 foot high you're looking at. And so the big pieces falling out of the sky are the fuel pools. And the reactor core was ejected from the building. Was rejected from the building. I had reactor 3 there. The picture, where the hell did that go? Oh yeah, backwards. So they gutted it. They gutted it, and it looked like this. There's nothing left, right? There's nothing left to the building. And the fuel pools would be at the top of the very building. And then they came out with this picture where they claimed they were at the very top of the building. First off, even now you can't get to the top of that because it's a lethal dose immediately. And so they faked that, and then they pretended they were taking the fuel out of the pool and putting it on this truck. But in reality, this is the building that's left. Just like the whole story just doesn't seem real, right? So this was reactor 4, and standing here is probably a lethal dose, particularly in a paper suit. Ain't going to protect you from gamma shines, and pretends it looks like this. So you always see all kinds of pictures like this all around the site, and tanks and everything else, where you got a bunch of people dressed in paper suits, perfect paper suits. Now, they burn around 7,000 of these suits each day at the end of the day. Paper suits. And this is what they claim. They burn 7,000 a day of those suits. Even though we know for a fact the homeless get secondhand suits. But you'll never see a suit with a tear into it or dirt on it. Wearing paper suits. So then they claim that, this is BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes, claiming he's in the fuel pool at the top of a building that doesn't even exist. He built this structure off-site, and they brought it in, and then they put panels on that also. Remember panels on number 1? Well, these buildings don't touch each other. The fuel pool is actually gone because that's what it actually looks like. And the fuel pools will be at the very top of the buildings. They're completely gone. And you can see the guts are hanging out of it all the way to the ground. So they cooked up this story where they built this structure and claimed that it looks like that. Now, the interesting thing about that story is, this is the control room, which is quite a long ways away from the reactors. They couldn't go back in there. It took them 7 years before they let a few people go in there and get their picture taken. And it's most likely nobody ever went in there after. But a nuclear meltdown in 2013, they claimed that they fixed it and it looked like this. And this was the official TEPCO narrative. And voila, it's a beautiful reactor. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. So there's 4 reactors that melted down. So 2 miles away, the community has been abandoned, where 50 senior citizens died at the hospital from radiation poisoning, were left behind. And of course, the industry tried to blame 3,000 people who died shortly after the meltdown on stress. But, we've seen evacuations of hurricanes and cyclones and typhoons of multiple millions of people, and we never seen 500 people die, or 1,000 or 2,000 die. But this is the only time we've seen 3,000 people die was after the nuclear meltdown. They're trying to blame it on stress because otherwise the industry gets the black eye. And the industry should get a little bit more than a black eye. Basically should get a bat in the back of their head. 3 people have moved back to Fukushima. Not the mayor or employees of the community, but people who don't know any better. Victims, actually. Which aims to attract 2,000 gullible suckers to... Now, 60 miles away, it's going to look like that. 60 miles away, it'll look like this. Thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions, in total of around 60 million one-ton bags, all the way out to Tokyo, 220 miles away. In fact, there's a water reclamation plant just before Chiba, which is about 20 kilometers from Tokyo, where they have 50,000 bags of sediment from the filtration for the water for the community. It is so radioactive they can't get rid of 51,000 or 1-ton bags of sediment from filtration, from the filters. So you can't drink the filters, the water pipes are radioactive, and you can't have that much radiation without the community also being irradiated. Because you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. That doesn't mean that you're not in a world of trouble. And so bless his heart that he got tricked and deceived and manipulated and coerced into going back into harm's way. So the nuclear industry can pretend that it has some redeeming qualities when it has none. No redeeming qualities whatsoever. Late last month, Yasuda slept in his own home for the first time in more than a decade as a resident of a nuclear wasteland. And then he's surrounded by these 1-ton bags. To give you context of how much we're talking about, there's enough 1-ton bags if you take one bag and put it in the back of a 1-ton truck. Because that's what you need to carry one of these bags, is a 1-ton truck. And the 1-ton truck is about 20 feet long, bumper to bumper. And if you stack them bumper to bumper, 1-ton trucks, it's 10 rows of traffic continuously around the planet. And so that's 60 feet wide. And 150,000 miles long, if you spread it out. So it's a lot, right? That's a lot of radiation, but that's only 3% of the land that they actually cleaned up in just Fukushima prefecture that we're actually talking about. A town in the shadow of the wrecked, which is unusual for them to use that word, by the way, wrecked, Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. It's not a power plant no more. The plant has a triple, and I showed you at the beginning, it has 4 reactor cores that melted down. So when you're changing fuel in a reactor core, you don't take all the fuel out. So the reactor core melted down, and number 4 is what I'm referring to. And there's 2 pools at the top of each of the buildings. So that's 8 fuel pools full of decades of reactor cores in 30-odd-year-old buildings. Triple meltdown. It's supposed to be triple meltdowns, but you'll never see them add the S. Well, you will, but it's 1 in every 100 or so. Triggered the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. And if you go out and read these stories, you'll see that exact framing of the narrative in almost every single story. Or the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. Sometimes they'll put a spin on it. But 90% of the times it says triggered the world's worst. So how is it that everybody knows to write that exact sentence? Well, lobbyists write the article, the media runs it and gets a kickback, and that's how the journalist gets a chop of the pie, piece of that pie, is by assigning his name to the article. He doesn't write the article. These are really complicated stories. You really got to know your stuff. Today, the couple are attempting to rebuild their lives in Fukushima. Because you can't just write these stories. I got to write a story about nuclear. I got to call the wife. I'm going to be home a little bit late, honey. It's a pretty difficult story. It doesn't work that way. To know all these little nuances that we see every single day is a veteran. This is somebody who's been at it all their lives. And the journalist, if you go look at what the journalist actually writes about, it's usually cat litter and hockey and stupid stuff. Today, the couple are attempting to rebuild their lives in Fukushima. The last of dozens of towns and villages to have ended their status as a no-go zone. Well, only 10% of the community is open. 10%. So you shouldn't breathe the air. And he painted this a couple of years ago, and I was furious. I come out and bashed him every day for an entire week. I was furious that they done that. The last dozens of, they're not towns or villages anymore. They're radioactive wastelands. To have ended their status as a no-go zone. No-go zone. That's forever. This is not rocket science. It's nuclear. Once it's radiated forever. Every piece of sidewalk, every piece of the house, every piece of the buildings, the telephone poles, the sidewalks, everything is irradiated. You can't unradiate it. It doesn't work that way. In fact, you're supposed to dig it up and take it to a repository that you don't have anywhere on the planet. Was deemed low enough for people to return by scum, and morons, and monsters, and demonic demons. And it's always the same people. There's about 100 of them worldwide that does this propaganda. It's the same people who wear many hats, and they're incredible degenerates if you ever listen to them, and I had the unfortunate pleasure of listening to the majority of them. Probably all of them, really. Local authorities hope more people will follow. Local authorities who don't even live there hope more people will follow when the evacuation orders is officially lifted. In parts of the town later this year. Parts. And those with young children are the most reluctant to contemplate returning to the town. See, that's disgusting. To say that is disgusting. Anybody who thinks bringing children back to a nuclear wasteland so they can get a paycheck is okay should not be allowed to have children for starters, and should be sent into Fukushima to work for a couple of days to see how that strikes their reality. He had to drive to the railway station to use the toilet. Railway station to use the toilet. So, let's go back to the headline. Last Fukushima town to reopen welcomes back its first residents. So when a lot of people just read the headline, right? Oh, they got the town open again. But when you read through the story, you start wondering, what planet are you on? It's a wasteland. New public housing for 25 households will open in October. New. Because everything there was so irradiated, they had to tear it down. New public housing for 25 households these are not households. You can fill it up with people, but there'll never be a household. There'll be a postcard for the nuclear industry. And a pretty evil and sadistic and sad and pathetic one at that. While the couple have no concerns about radiation. First off, they got to drive past millions of one-ton bags to get to Fukushima. The mayor doesn't live there. The police don't live there. There's no hospital or shops or stores or toilets at the train station. And you can only use 10% of the community. Can't cross the street. Can't go that way. Can't go that way. You get in your car, you got to drive and get out of town before you can get out of the car again. When you come down, you got to go right straight into your little square. This is the kookiest stuff imaginable. And so that the nuclear industry can pretend again that it's not evil. All that evilness to pretend that it's not evil. It just defies any kind of rationale, don't it? That's normal. That is normal. This is nuclear. That's normal. That's like that all day, every story. It's the same thing. It's like, wow, man, you guys are some sadistic creatures. Atom for peace, a journey again delayed. Nuclear's under a lot of pressure. Really? I don't see anybody out there bashing nuclear. I don't. There's Kevin Blanche and Organic Slant and me and a few more at best. A handful, 5 maybe. That's it. They're actually publicly bashing the shit out of this demonic, twisted, sadistic industry. Neither a genie nor a Pandora's box. Well, obviously you're not talking about Grossi, who, by the way, this despicable, hideous, monstrous, hateful, horrific scumbag creature will sniff your bicycle seats. Grossi, appropriately named. DeepMind has trained. Now he's Grossi's with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is United Nations, aka the New World Order, according to George Bush Sr. I'll play the clip, otherwise it's not real. Hang on. Been here before, been here and done it. And he's going to talk about the United Nations and repeatedly call them the New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
The UN founders, and who is the UN? Well, they're 193 military, and one of their little tech dogs, Grossi, or the IAEA, is United Nations. And so they slowly, in increments, have taken over almost the entire planet, and Google got their back. DeepMind, which is Alphabet, aka Google, has trained an AI to control nuclear fusion. I just want to poke myself in the eyes whenever I see this stuff. China now understands what a nuclear rivalry looks like, the Atlantic. Again, this is nonsense. You really think one of the biggest countries on the planet doesn't understand the difference? Oh, yeah. Well, they got to write something, right? They got to earn their paycheck of being creatures. The notions that anyone might use them in a contest of mutual destruction seems like a relic of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a dark memory from a bygone era. Yeah, well, I say it all the time. They can't use the weapon. You got all these nuclear subs out there. They can't use their weapons. They don't even need to put nuclear warheads in them. They can just build the bombs. Forget about the plutonium, uranium. You don't need it. You're not going to use it. It saves a lot of weight. Just have dummy bombs. They've done that before. There's currently a trial going on for the last couple of days in The Hague. It's an international trial about the coronavirus.
I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Rainer Föhmich, attorney at law in Germany, for an overview.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Rainer Föhmich, and it is my pleasure to serve as one member of a group of distinguished international attorneys and lawyers who have been collaborating on this very important case for many months now. This case, involving the most heinous crimes against humanity committed under the guise of a corona pandemic on a global scale, looks complicated only at first glance. But when you put together all those pieces, all those little pieces of the puzzle, as we will do this for you with the help of many renowned experts and other witnesses during this proceeding, you will see 4 sets of facts. 1, there is no corona pandemic, but only a PCR test plandemic, fueled by an elaborate psychological operation designed to create a constant state of panic among the world's population. This agenda has been long planned. It's ultimately unsuccessful. Precursor was the swine flu some 12 years ago. And it was cooked up by a group of super-rich, psychopathic and sociopathic people who hate and fear people at the same time, have no empathy, and are driven by the desire to gain full control over all of us, the people of the world. They are using our governments and the mainstream media, both of which they literally own, to convey their panic propaganda 24/7. 2. The virus itself can be treated safely and effectively with vitamin C, D, zinc, etc., and also with off-label use of ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, etc. But all these, not alternative methods of treatment, but real methods of treatment, were banned by those who are using the guise of this pandemic to push their ultimate goal, which is to get everyone to receive the, as we will show in this proceeding, not only ineffective but highly dangerous, yes, lethal experimental injections. 3. The same people who made the swine flu, which ultimately turned out to be a mild flu, into a pandemic 12 years ago by first changing the definition of what a pandemic is and then creating panic, created this corona pandemic. The swine flu was their first real attempt at creating a pandemic. And just as one of its purposes then was to divert our attention from the blatantly fraudulent activities of their financial industry, more aptly to be called a financial mafia, which had become visible through the Lehman crisis, this is also one of their major purposes of this corona pandemic now. Had we taken a closer look then, during the Lehman crisis, instead of blindly believing our government's promises that the perpetrators of those financial crimes will be held liable, we would have seen then that they had been looting and plundering our public coffers for decades. And we would have seen that our governments are not our governments anymore. Rather, they have been taken over by the other side through their main platform, the World Economic Forum, which had started to create their own global leaders through their Young Global Leaders program as early as 1992. 2 of the first graduates being Angela Merkel and Bill Gates. And we would have understood already then what we will show you now through this proceeding. These financial crimes went unchallenged by our politicians because they're aiding and abetting those who commit them and profiting from these crimes. 4. Ultimately, however, we will show to you, the jury, that the other side's main purpose is to gain full and complete control over all of us. This involves the finalization of their looting and plundering by deliberately destroying our small and medium-sized businesses, retail businesses, hotel and restaurants, so that platforms such as Amazon can take over. And this involves population control, which in their view requires both a massive reduction of the population and manipulating the DNA of the remaining population with the help, for example, of mRNA experimental injections. But it also requires, in their view, the deliberate destruction of democracy, of the rule of law, and of our constitutions through chaos, so that ultimately we will agree to losing our national and cultural identities and instead will accept a one-world government under the UN, which is now under the full control of them and their World Economic Forum, a digital passport through which each and every move is monitored and controlled, and one digital currency, which we will only be able to receive from one World Bank. Theirs, of course.
Crazy, right? And so what they're trying to do, they have judge, and these are all lawyers, all experts, professors, and everything else. And they want to recommend war crimes and crimes against humanity, rather, charges against individuals like Bill Gates. They got a big list of people, and they're the real deal. Everything is legitimate. It's really interesting, right? Worst case scenario, they're going to identify all the players behind the scamdemic. And it's astounding when you actually think about the implications of this. And we see them pulling back already here in Canada. 5 provinces just announced that they were going to lift all the passports, mandates, and masks. And other countries we've just seen in the last few days come on with the same thing. And so that's a bit of good news. That's a bit of good news. Let me get back to business here. And that's been going on for several days. It's going to be going on for quite a few more days. And it's incredibly amount of detail. Let's keep it rolling here. Yeah, and so it's a group of lawyers and judges and experts are doing it. They're not talking about it. They're doing it right as we talk, right? So it's a big deal. And I hope they throw this figure in the mess too while they're at it. International Atomic Energy Agency head Rafael Gross. Do you think that's an accident that his last name is Grossi? Pretty appropriate, isn't it? Saudi Energy Minister Prince Salman told the Future Minerals Summit in January the country intended to use its large deposits of uranium ore to develop nuclear power. I didn't know Saudi Arabia had a big deposit of uranium ore. Let me be very specific about this. We do have a huge amount of uranium resources that we would like to exploit, and we will be doing it in the most transparent way. Really? In Saudi Arabia? Oh yeah, gonna be transparent. United States Department of Energy and Department of Monsters launches nuclear hydrogen infrastructure program. This is the World Nuclear News. They're degenerates, right? Days after it launched a U.S. $6 billion program to support the continuing operations of existing nuclear power plants. They got 96 plants. Divide $6 billion into 96, and that won't even pay for their. It's literally nothing, right? And they are allocating $9.5 billion in clean hydrogen technologies. And first off, hydrogen is one of the most carbon-intensive things on the planet to produce. It's absurdly carbon-intensive. And so $9.5 billion, and that includes nuclear, because we hear they're posturing about that a lot the last couple of years of making nuclear with hydrogen. U.S. nuclear power plants are essentially achieving President Biden's climate goals. Really? President Biden's climate goals? You're sure you're not meant United Nations carbon extermination goals? It's no accident. Never mind, we'll cover that some other night. Department of Energy is committed to keeping 100% clean electricity flowing and preventing premature closures. First off, all American nuclear power plants are old, and the newest one they completed was Watts Bar. And the Vogue plants that they're trying to build are already around $12 billion over budget and many, many years behind. The Department of Energy is committed to keeping 100% clean electricity flowing. Well, nuclear is not clean. Nuclear is absurdly, unbelievably dirty and carbon intensive. You got to have 2 gas, oil, coal plants just to run a nuclear power plant. It's stupid. It's better off to take the 2 gas, oil, coal plants, run the big turbines, pump water up a hill, and then slowly release the water into generators, multiple generators, than it is to have a nuclear power attached to it. Now, nuclear is stupid. It's literally the stupidest thing on the planet, and its entire legacy exists by deception and misrepresentation. What I wish nuclear energy opponents understood will happen if they win. What I wish nuclear energy opponents understood will happen if they win. Well, first off, if they had won, we wouldn't have these radioactive plumes circling the planet from Fukushima, exterminating all the species. You despicable sack of shit, you. Seaver Wang. You despicable, disgusting parasite. A dispatch from a possible... So he's writing this story. Well, the nuclear industry is. He's putting his name on it. The lobbyists wrote the story, and they're in the year 2072. In 2072, smoke rises from a chimney at the Bougie, appropriately named, a nuclear power plant in France on January 25th of this year, surrounded by farms and houses. It's absolutely evil. That's evil to have houses right by a nuclear power plant and farms. It's absurdly evil. The year is 2072. I don't feel a day older than 59. Any hope of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is long dead, yet thanks to nuclear. That's radioactive fallout from Fukushima, which is global warming, by the way. Earth's mean temperature is about 2.1 degrees Celsius. It's already about 7 degrees above it, the pre-industrial levels, and climbing still, with human beings struggling to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions. Well, first off, these are some twisted people, aren't they? The plumes, radioactive plumes, this is not really a good model. We got other models coming up here. They're circling the planet, covering the entire planet with invisible plumes. There's pulsing energy at the speed of light from each of these atoms that is falling. And they're pulsing energy in every direction at the speed of light. 186,000 miles per millisecond. And they'll do that for millions of years. And the nuclear industries are like that. Yeah, but it's not energy, Dana. It's not like going to heat the planet up. Well, what is it? Not only that, those emitters are going to hit each other at the speed of light. They're going to change direction at the speed of light. The gammas, the alphas, the neutrons, the betas don't mix. Right? So they change direction when they hit each other. That causes a X-ray, a very unique X-ray effect, and it's from the braking where it changes direction. It's a frightening extinction event, basically. The Utes of 2072. It's really interesting how they talk about the Utes. The Utes, because nobody else matters, only the Utes. This is another model based on 19 days. This particular projection behind me, I'll get out of the way for a second. And it covers the whole planet in 16 days. The plume is a continuous plume around the entire planet. It didn't stop after 16 days. In particular, the young adults of 2072 find it absolutely unfathomable that environmentalists, humans, 50 years prior could have been so vehemently opposed to deadly nuclear energy. Well, we're vehemently opposed. This is a depiction from France of Fukushima radioactive fallout. I think we have the moral high ground to be vehemently opposed to anything that has these attributes, yeah? Covers the whole planet in 16 days. Do you think the rain out of this stops after 16 days? When it gets rained out, it comes down and it starts binding and being assimilated in all the plants. All the plants now for the rest of humanity are emitting radioactive pollen. Imagine what that's doing to the bees and pollinators and hummingbirds and everything else. After all, because ants and everything eats pollen, right, or honey. After all, in 2072, nuclear power is commonplace. Yeah, not in your wildest fantasy. Perhaps 20% of global primary energy is produced by nuclear reactors. Perhaps 20%. Small nuclear reactors are a normal sight, they claim, in 2072. I guarantee you they won't be. And you know why? Because by 2026, there's going to be 4,800 gigawatts of nuclear on the planet. And not all nuclear reactors are 1,000 megawatts, and so, which is a gigawatt. So when you actually do the scale, by 2026, according to the International Energy Agencies, there'll be the equivalent of around 5,500 nuclear power plants. Last year was 333 nuclear power plants worth of renewables came online, which is 290 gigawatts of renewables versus 0.05 of nuclear or something came online. Small nuclear reactors they're going to be running on mixed oxide fuel. That's the game. That's how they're going to get the extra power out of these things. And so they're not going to be necessary. It's what we're seeing, and we're seeing it really blatant too in the last 2, 3, 4 years, is this panicking of the nuclear industry, the lobbyists who writes these stories. Because an average person has zero possibility of writing a story like this. It's zero. To know all these nuances and have all your ducks line up properly is forensically, when you look at this is obviously an experienced academic in the nuclear industry who wrote the article. Small nuclear reactors are a normal sight, individually powering factories, mines, island nations, and rural communities. This is absurd suggestion. While large reactors in clusters of 6 to 12, small units supply heat and electricity to cities. But there won't be no need for that nonsense. See, if we took all, because you haven't got them, they don't even exist, they're paper reactors. But if you took that same willpower and applied it to renewables, you would solve all the problems. There'd be no need for nuclear, no need for deep geological repositories, and it would create 5 times the jobs. And it'd be great jobs. You're not dealing with toxic radioactive fallout. This is a plutonium-239 dispersal based on TEPCO's data. All of this nuclear energy is generated as cleanly as that produced from solar or wind, says the lunatics. We hear this all the time lately. There's another one we're hearing a lot lately. Oh, it's cleaner than solar and wind, Dana. Yeah, so is your head. This is a Neptunium-239 dispersal based upon TEPCO's data. Covers the entire planet. Coal, oil, and gas emissions don't cover the whole planet, don't pulse energy at the speed of light every second for millions of years on top of that. Nuclear is the only thing capable of wiping out the planet. In the long run, and it already is, anti-nuclear advocates, or just pro-life, really, will not succeed. Really? You're dreaming. You're not going to succeed. It remains an utter fantasy to imagine that activism will bring about the end to the atomic age at a time when nuclear technology is poised for revolutionary steps forward. Yeah, well, you've never taken a step forward now in about 40 years. And in the near term, opposition to nuclear power can certainly succeed in preventing and slowing down the advance of a sorely needed climate solution. It sounds like Rod Adams, don't it? Right? That's typical of Rod Adams. Rod will take a whole lot of peyote or cocaine or something, and he'll record this fantasy, and then he'll type it out and he'll prop it up there, right? He's sniffing glue or something when he writes that stuff. Coal, oil, and gas doesn't make half a country unedible, the food into it, and uninhabitable. Nuclear is not supposed to exist. It's not even the right. See, nuclear it's a mistake, and they got it to work, and they had to pressurize it to 1,000 pounds, 2,200 psi to make it work. They had to bring the temperatures up to 600 or 700 degrees to make it work. They had to have all kinds of contraptions and devices. They had to have just the whole story, and they made it work, but it's only 5% or so efficient for the fuel-wise, and the reactor electricity production is only about 30% efficient. It's a total failure. And they're running on designs from 70 years ago, basically. And they modify them a little bit, but they're not able to come up with their own design. It's the same thing with the fusion reactors. The original paper that they're using today to create a fusion is from around 1913, 1914. A single paper postulating about how fusion would work. If Tesla was alive, he could probably make it work. But the inbreeds they got there now in positions of authorities are incapable of making anything work. They're the entitled lot. Their parents were scumbags, and their parents were scumbags, and their parents were scumbags, and the current generation by birth are scumbags. Nuclear power is on the rise. And it could be the best way to nail zero emissions, says the lunatic lobbyist who wrote it. Zero emission, you say? You already killed the Pacific, most of the Atlantic. I've done the research expeditions for many years. And the arthritis today is brutal. It's just brutal tonight. Must be a big change in the weather coming. Hopefully for the better. I know it's not, though. Nuclear is such an ugly, freaking hideous creature on top of that. Every facet of nuclear is just stupid. But according to a new study published this Monday, that's pretty convenient, nuclear may be cheapest way to net zero. Ooh, you said net zero. Which is Miles Allen. When the crazy's coming for you, baby. Miles Allen. He's the physicist behind net zero. He wrote a paper, Professor Miles Allen. And United Nations like yank. Well, we like that one. We'll use that to bludgeon the entire planet. Same thing with climate change, the father of global warming, rather. And the father of carbon footprint was, which is just bizarre, was a campaign. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company BP in 2005. It was a large advertising campaign to blame you for a shipwreck and the destruction of a coastline with an oil spill. Oh, well, because you wanted it, we had to get a ship and do it. Really? You don't think anybody else would have took the job and got it too? Like, it's absurd. So the carbon footprint, you had net zero by Professor Miles Allen, you had global warming, and of course, don't forget Dr. Death, James Hansen, climate change, Mr. Climate Change. What a demon he turned out to be, didn't he? How green is nuclear energy? Let me put that back where it belongs here first. A brief, frustrating history of the carbon footprint. That there is no carbon footprint. It was meant to make you... There's uranium footprint, right? There's uranium footprint, killed the Pacific. All the birds, mammals, and animals are all emaciated. And cover the whole planet in radioactive fallout that'll never go away. Long after the human experience, that'll still be trying to kill the bacteria left on the planet. Ukraine's Energoatom sets out, this is World Nuclear News, it's a lobbying group, and Alphabet, aka Google, always puts them up on the first page. He noticed a recent decision by the European Union include nuclear power and taxonomy showed that nuclear power will be the driving force for decarbonization. Despite the fact that in 2026 renewables will replace in gigawatts, will have more out there than all nuclear power plants combined and fossil fuels combined will be coming online. The majority of this is coming online from, say, 2 years ago to 2026. You'll replace everything worth of energy. So the nuclear industry is panicking, and they're trying to repurpose themselves. So we got a poll there tonight, if you're interested in polls. 90% of Fukushima is too radioactive to live in. So is the 10% left actually safe to live in? No, of course not. It's absurd that a couple of people would vote that it is. It's just mind-boggling that a few people said, oh yeah, no, they're totally, Dana. But it's simply not. It doesn't work that way. That's the nuclear industry. There are people that made a mistake, too quick on the trigger. Department of Energy to offer $6 billion to keep struggling nuclear reactors online, which is not going to do the job. They need $600 billion or something like that. Applicants will have to prove the reactors faces closures for economic reasons, and that closing the reactor would lead to increase in air pollution. And of course, these old reactors, got fuel pools. And the fuel pools are just hemorrhaging radiation 24/7. 1,440 minutes a day is just trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of isotopes released into the environment. And most of these reactors are surrounded by farms. The farms will suck up huge loads of radiation that's shipped worldwide to murder people. The U.S. fleet of 93 nuclear reactors currently provides 52% of the nation's clean electricity. This is not clean electricity, for God's sake. Stop it already. Give it up. Hang on. Well, it boils 1 million gallons a minute per reactor. And so a glass of salt water would have 1 billion creatures in it. And 75 to 100 million of them are the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestering chain. The other 900 million creatures into it is the soup of life, the eggs and larvae and everything else. So it's 16 glasses of water in a gallon. There's 1 million gallons a minute. So you got 16 million billion creatures destroyed every minute, 1,440 minutes a day in each of the 93 reactors. It's a genocide machine. And the emissions coming from the fuel pools are disease factories. Up to 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Where have all the terrorists gone? Carbon free, you say?
Or you could ask someone who actually works with ionizing radiation and uses that knowledge to keep his own arse safe. But why am I not freaking out that I'm getting 30 times the background radiation on this plane? Well, radiation's a bit odd like that. The more of it you get exposed to, the higher your chances of getting cancer. So
first off, as I showed you in the models, the atmosphere is full of radiation, all the way from weapons testing. All the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation. And what he's trying to do is pretend that the man-made anthropogenic radiation is being picked up is from the sunshine or from elevation. The Geiger counter doesn't increase because of sunshine. And by the way, my Geiger counter is, I took it down because we were watching that. But both of these are terrorists. This is the shoe bomber, and that's his twin by the looks of it. He's a nuclear scientist, and it's unbelievable. He's a nuclear physicist, but he's a demonic, pathetic, lying sack of shit. He's after telling people Fukushima is like walking in sunshine. Fukushima is like the rocks. Fukushima is like bananas. And Fukushima is like potato chips. See, these guys are not flying, but when they got close to the ship, their Geiger counter went screaming because the ship is driving around in the oceans, dumping nuclear waste overboard. And so when those drums, each 33 feet of water, there's another 14.5 pounds of pressure. So if you're going to sink it, say in 100 feet, right, it's another, you're getting close to 50 psi. And these will just collapse, and the radiation is released. And they're just driving along, throwing everything overboard nonstop. So, carbon-free, Fukushima residents can visit family grave. Like, why is that a headline? Well, because they couldn't go back for years and years and years, and they shouldn't have went back. These are 1-ton bags of radiation. You got to go past millions and millions of 1-ton bags of radiation. They were dumping it in the ground, dumping it in the ocean. It ends up in the water table. Every time it rains and snows, it's distributed out into the environment. These people would have died that day. Uranium mines, Navajo has 15,000 abandoned uranium mines, of course. These ponds are chemical ponds evaporated into the environment when they're finished with the chemicals. Real good neighbors, aren't they? And these uranium mines is just the beginning of it. It's carbon intensive. They go through enough carbon here that it doesn't warrant running the reactors. The reactors are just carbon intensive for decades to build them. The process to fuel is insidiously carbon intensive, and the stuff left over is radioactive for millions of years. These ponds are evaporated. It's disgusting what they do. 15,000 abandoned uranium mines in Navajo land in the natives, because the nuclear industry hates the natives worldwide. You can't drink the water in any of these communities, but nuclear is carbon-free, Dana. But you can't drink the water because of nuclear. You can't swim in the rivers because of nuclear. The nuclear industry put missile silos in all these communities. And so they were holding the communities as human hostages. That's the nuclear industry. Look, you do something for the nuclear industry, it'll stab you in the back immediately. You can't go back to your communities. That's so carbon-free, isn't it? They only use the homeless and the destitute, the victims of society. And when you get radiated, you can't even touch each other. These are people who were so radiated, they had to be separated because they're so radioactive. These plants are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Their entire legacy is predicated upon deception and lies. And this picture here where they alleged the Fukushima 50 wanted to be left alone, so they had to hide them behind tarps. But the Fukushima 50, if that's what's going on there, are actually dressed the same as the rest of them in their paper suits. They're stupid, pathetic, useless paper suits. And the Fukushima 50 are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. You got to leave all your animals behind to perish and starve to death. Is carbon-free, is that? And all nuclear waste dumps you're looking at there are hemorrhaging into your community. And then they say they got 1,000 tanks, but we counted it. They only got 750. And that's if you count the small ones too. The only nuclear power plant currently under construction is the Vogtle plant in Georgia. It's years behind schedules and $14 billion over the original budget. $14 billion over budget. $14 billion? $14 billion over budget. Just what? Refurbishment of the third Darlington reactor. It's here in Canada. And how gross for them to use the word darling on a nuclear reactor, eh? And then how did they get the money for this refurbishment? Well, just after Fukushima happened, two things happened around 93 days after the nuclear meltdown started. One thing was Canada lifted restrictions on all food imports from Japan. Send us whatever you want. When they don't want, nobody else will take it, send it to Canada. We'll frig over the Canadians. We'll murder the Canadians. And the second thing that happened was that the Pickering and Darlington Bruce Power and the Darlington nuclear power plant got $13 billion each allocated to them. So they poisoned all of Canada with radioactive food all day, every day for the rest of our lives. And they gouged us at $26 billion. And of course, these things won't come in on schedule. And these are disease factories on top of that. And they're on a freshwater river. The lowest of low lives, eh? $12.8 billion. They already stole $0.2 billion, did they? The safe, clean. This is not safe and it's not clean. Workhorse generates 20% of Ontario's electricity without greenhouse gases or carbon emissions. But that's all it does is greenhouse gases. It's called radioactive fallout. And the carbon emissions is the death of all the species in the water it boils away. And the water itself, by boiling it into the atmosphere, these little particulates, is creating carbon. Darlington will continue to cleanly power Ontario homes and hospitals. Really? Why would you put hospitals in there? Trying to play on people's hearts. Because no other power can power a hospital, only nuclear, Dana. Oh, okay, I should have known that. That makes sense. Rolls-Royce to open, and these are despicable people. You'll know they're scumbag the minute you see them walking down the road. Rolls-Royce to open talks on leasing UK nuclear site. They're going to go after several disused facilities in England and Wales, which, because the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority of the United Kingdom has still never decommissioned a power plant or a nuclear submarine. And the one they're talking about is surrounded, as far as you can see, with farms, so they can poison you for their whole lifespan. It's a sadistic industry. It's an industry full of just weirdos and lunatics and kooks. These are actually crazies. Westinghouse and Kozloduy, whatever his friggin' name is, threatens a nuclear cybersecurity. What the fuck are you doing on the internet, shit for brains? Get off the internet, moron. Morons. Morons. Put a nuclear power plant online on the internet. You're idiots. You're actually idiots. Signed a contract for design, delivery, and installation of a cyber security system. What the frig are you doing online, you bird brains? Any missile launch may be perceived as a nuclear strike, says Russia's spokesperson. Again, like what's going on? I'm afraid that coronavirus trials that are going on, if they come out with a guilty verdict, they might start a nuclear war to a staged false flag event in order to absolve themselves of liabilities. Because these are lunatics, right? The whole world is about to find out who caused all of this, and that they're going to provide the evidence and go ahead and recommend criminal trials in The Hague for people like Bill Gates and the rest of them. It seems surreal to say something like that, don't it? But that's what I've been watching it, and they're putting out about 5 hours of evidence a day. Any missile launch may be perceived as a nuclear strike, because they can't tell if it's a nuclear or not, so they're saying, well, if we see a missile launched, we're going to launch our nuclear. So this is we've seen this back and forth going on now. They have no right to be talking like this, by the way. They have no right to talk like that. What a degenerate scum idiot machine to be talking like this. And what the hell is Putin still doing running the country? That's a dictator at this stage. It's interesting here an answer to the following question. In the event of a nuclear apocalypse, would the surviving electors forgive such short-sighted behavior by their country's defense minister? If you got a nuclear war, you can't cash your checks on Friday anymore. Jennifer Graham Holt to tour a nuclear program in South Carolina, which is pretty standard stuff, right? You got to go down and kiss ass because the nuclear industry runs the country. She got to go down there and lick some dicks and kiss some ass. Excuse the language. My apologies. I get a little cranky when I see the whole planet being destroyed by monsters and everybody's sitting there complaining because I said something naughty. But it's okay for them to murder everybody and destroy the future. It's not okay for me to have any emotions, right? On Thursday, Granholm is tour the nuclear engineering program at Carolina State University. We've covered them lots. They're degenerate scum. They're incredible degenerate scum academic community there. The nuclear students that come out of there are the groveling type. They get to the nuclear site, they'll lick everybody's boots on the site day one. NATO, which is not even supposed to exist, this is a bunch of countries got together and bullies other countries that don't have a military or a armed forces or a navy or infrastructure even. It's a thug industry. NATO, the thug defense minister, discusses Russia-Ukraine nuclear safety and takes stock of increased defense spending, gouging, stealing, embezzling. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg said that NATO defense ministers met to address Russia's continued military buildup in and around Ukraine on the first day of NATO defense meetings. So who gives a shit? All of a sudden we got United Nations taking over the world. NATO's taking over the world. Nobody's allowed to have a country. They got to be either or both NATO and United Nations pet lapdogs. You're just kooky, despicable cowards. You kooky, despicable morons. Jasmine Owens, lead organizer and policy coordinator at Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is Helen Caldicott. Hang on. I'm not cranky. I wallow in this excrement all day, every day. Haven't seen Swanee D for a little bit. Hope he's doing okay. Something must have happened. I was the last to learn or know around here, ain't we? Were you too, Helen? You despicable creature, you. Here's Helen. Now, Helen's going to say, it doesn't look like that. It looks like that. Reactor 4 in Japan. Now, she's done that in hundreds of interviews. But this particular guy asks her about it. She said, no, it looks like that.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Do you think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
Well, first off, there's no top to Building 4. There's no bottom to Building 4 either. And it can't look like that. And Helen's wrote 14 anti-nuclear books. But if you actually study Helen like we have over the years, you learn that Helen is 100% not who she claims she is. And she has thousands of doctors who joined her group and takes their marching orders from her. And she only needs a couple of hundred to hoodwink the planet. Trudeau uses nuclear option without justification. The Toronto Sun. Yeah, because Canada got rid of democracy a few days ago. Now we have this little weasel, this incredible weasel. What a weasel this creature turned out to be. And his dad was the same way. His father used to work for a company in France. Hang on. His father used to work for this company in France. What the hell is his name? Ooh, Canada. Oh, Jesus, my eyes are getting bad here tonight. Yeah, the French Connection. Here, I'll bring it up for you now. Yeah. The French Connection, who's who of the Canucks politics, May the 12th, 2013. And this article, Prime Minister in waiting, he was talking about Paul Martin, but Chrétien is in there and Trudeau's in there. Now, Jean Chrétien's daughter, he named her Friends. She's married to Andre Desmarais, and his father, Paul Desmarais, is the largest shareholder of the largest corporation in France, and he also held tens of billions of dollars. And then, so you got all kinds of prime minister worked for him, including Justin Trudeau's father worked for him too, before he became prime minister. Paul Martin worked for him, became prime minister. Pierre Trudeau worked for him, became prime minister. Jean Chrétien worked for him, became prime minister. And a lot of the premiers of Canada had worked for him also. So do you think that's just a weird accident? And he made them all rich, all powerful, and they all gave the big companies in France all the best contracts. And that's called the French Connection. You have to read it on your own. It's a long article. It's a really good article, and it draws you straight lines all the way back. And Jean Chrétien's daughter married his son, and he became prime minister of the country, and gave his son-in-law the satellite service across Canada. A very lucrative business, obviously. Let's keep it rolling, baby. We got a poll here tonight. Anybody's interested in poll? Got a poll. 90% of Fukushima is too radioactive to live in. So the 10% left, is the 10% left actually safe to live in? We got a staggering 17% says yes. Nah, that can't be right. You got 83% says no, which is the right answer. How can you be... Like, go to a nuclear dump, dig out a section in the middle, and build your house, and the cops will come in and arrest you. You can't go living in a nuclear dump, sir. Canadians should be deeply concerned about the Trudeau's government decision to invoke the Emergency Act, which is martial law. He declared martial law in Canada. And people like him will, and his crew will use it. Michigan Senator opposes Canadian nuclear waste site near the Great Lakes. You know, we're for fresh water for 40 million people. That's where Canada's going to put a nuclear dump to. Preventing nuclear wastewater dumping. That story from Holtec, owner of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant. It's the cheapest option is to dump the nuclear water like directly into the ocean. And Holtec says, well, we can decommission the nuclear plant quicker than anybody else. This is how you do it. It's absurd. It's like 1 million gallons. It's absurd, though. The Lords debate nuclear energy finance bill. Really? Debate? That's a little bit of a stretch, isn't it? Come on. The nuclear energy financing bill, which will pass with flying colours, will provide financing for new nuclear power stations that they don't need, can't use, to a regulated asset base. It'll take them a couple of decades just to build one. They can't even build one. They got to get China and France to come do it, which empowers the economic regulators to levy charges on the consumers. But they can get the consumers to pay for it in advance. Just gouge them. Why's my bill got up? Because we want another nuclear power plant. Well, why don't you fucking get a loan? Well, why should we? We could just get you to pay for it. We're a United Kingdom. That's what we do. We're scum. Prime Minister comments on importance of nuclear power. And they show you power plants surrounded by farms. He said similar stations have already been built in Belarus and Russia. And they're going to build one in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Toza, we want. You can still find Cold War era nuclear air raid sirens hidden in plain sight in China. That's what we call it. In Canada, we call it China. Toronto. There's a police state for you, Toronto. In the heydays of the Cold War, they had thousands of these sirens across Canada, ready to alert us to a doomsday nuclear exchange between the United States and the USSR. But Gorbachev signed a piece of paper and dissolved the whole country. Oops, there goes your pension. There goes your pensions. There goes your patents. And have you seen there at the one of the anniversaries recently? His big, huge mansion, huge property, all kinds of luxury vehicles. He's not hurting. Everybody else is, though, but he's not hurting. Signed a piece of paper, dissolved the country. Rather than quit his job, he dissolved the country. The only person to get rid of Prime Minister Trudeau is the Governor General, the Queen's right-hand man here in Parliament in Canada is called the Governor General. And he or she is the only person, besides the Queen, that can fire Trudeau. Nobody in Canada can fire Trudeau. They can prorogue Parliament where everybody don't show up, but you can't actually fire him. Only the Queen of England can do it, and she does it through the Governor General here in Canada. Initially operated by the Department of National Defence, maintained under contracts to Bell Canada. That's just stupid. Stupid. Proper risk management needed on use of nuclear energy as green energy. Like calling nuclear energy green energy is like calling a fucking giraffe a bumblebee. It's absurd. It's absurd to call nuclear green. I mean, the nuclear industry specializes in absurdness, by the way. And for Halloween, they like to have a big party. They call it Constipated Party. United. Last year it was called COPS 26, COP 26. I hate it when they show you plants and farmland in front of a nuclear power plant. Freaks me out. Emergency preparedness exercise here in Canada. The nuclear industry in Canada has got to be the strangest thing I cover everything on the planet. But the Ontario Power Generation, these are just goblins. Ontario Power Generation and partner organizations are participating in a nuclear emergency. What are you going to fucking do if it melts down? You really think you're going to run up there and put the fire out? You really think that you're going to evacuate everybody in time? This is ludicrous talk. You can have all the emergency drills you want. When she melts down, you're all going to do the same thing. You're not going to use the sirens. You're not going to alert the population. You're not going to do jack shit. You're going to bury it. They're just demonic demons, and they're greedy. They'll destroy the whole country, the entire country, so they can get their paychecks on Friday. They'll murder everybody with radioactive fallout so they can get their paychecks every Friday. During the 3-day stupid size, Ontario provincial government, the region of Durham, municipality of Clarington, city of Oshawa, and various other provincial, federal morons will work together to test the interoperability and elements of the respective response plans during a simulated incident. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, which really doesn't exist, this is the insiders in the industry, gets a cushy job to lie to the Canadians, which is responsible for regulating nuclear stations in Canada. Really? When? When are they going to do that, I wonder? We'll observe the exercise and provide feedback. Feedback. How come I don't get invited to this shit? Residents near nuclear facilities are encouraged to learn what to do in unlikely. Sure, your fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation all the time. Event of an emergency. You're just despicable creatures. You're revolting creatures. And your children are going to be revolting creatures, and their children will be revolting creatures. This large-scale exercise at the Darlington Nuclear is an excellent opportunity for OPG and partner organizations to practice their emergency response plan and procedures. There's no such thing as being too prepared, said Steve, the chief nuclear moron. Like, you can't do nothing. If you have a meltdown, you can't do nothing. All you do is run away. You don't want to stay there and breathe it. And highly unlikely, which is what he said about Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Mayak and Sellafield, Santa Susana and SL1 and la 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 la. All nuclear power plants in Canada are required to conduct full-scale emergency training exercises every 3 years. Way to stay on top of it, guys. My fate's restored. U.S. Navy engineer admits trying to sell nuclear sub-secrets to a foreign power. Good for him. Not like he makes much money at the job. That's what I'd do if I had a job. Pelosi's in Israel. Pelosi. What was it she used to say? We got to pass the bill so we can find out what's in it. Hang on. I don't think I got it there somewhere. Who knows what Dana? P. Should be P-E-E, not P-E-L. Oh. Look no further. I might have to play it twice because I got to adjust the volume for you. Been a while.
But we have to pass the bill so that...
Hang on. I'll turn it up. Here we go. Try it again.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
One more time.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
I got to do that one more time. Hang on.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Okay, I won't laugh this time. Sorry. Hang on. One more time.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
I'll never get sick of that. I got to put that on for my ringer. on my phone. Fuck, man. Where's the fucking dirty suicide bombers when you need them, I wonder? Chernobyl on the sea. Furious row breaks out after we covered this last week. Claims Blackpool looked like a nuclear wasteland. Well, it does. Rival councillors blasted incredible disrespect to know that the town often hosts children from Belarus who are still suffering from Chernobyl's after effects. Yeah, because Belarus and Ukraine is just tons and tons and tons of orphanages of abandoned and deformed children. Did you know that? Because nuclear is so carbon-free, right? And that's the place they're talking about. It's a big tourist trap. Nothing wrong with that. Smart meters threaten to interfere with nuclear missile warning systems. Smart meters. First off, there's nothing stupider than those planes and farms close to nuclear power plants or nuclear installations. But these planes, their job is like an hour a day. They fly and drop their bombs from 40,000 feet and they fly back home and have supper with mummy. Qatar, the risk of a nuclear disaster in Ukraine. Again, fear-mongering. But the nuclear power plant they show, when you look it up, surrounded by farms. Just a coincidence, Dave. Of course it is. I know that. I was just saying. I'm just saying. Were a reactor core to melt, explosive gases or belching radioactive debris would exit the containment structure. And once in the atmosphere, the effluences would settle over thousands of miles, dumping light to very toxic radioactive elements on urban and rural landscapes. And spent nuclear fuel could cause further devastations if the storage pools were set afire. Like when they get set afire, it blows up. I showed you the explosions earlier. There's still, like Kevin Camp with Beyond Nuclear, Helen Caldicott, denies that Reactor 4 fuel pool burnt. And of course, we played a video of Helen Caldicott doing that earlier, denying it. No fuel pool burnt, Dina. No. In and around the reactor in Chernobyl, 600,000 liquidators. Not workers, not victims, not humans, but liquidators. Liquidators. Hello? Hello? Yeah, I'm supporting the truckers. You darn fucking tootin' I am. Bless their hearts in Ottawa. I played that clip earlier. 100% in support of the truckers. I absolutely love these people. Thank goodness somebody finally got out there and stood their ground. And I think they're doing a wicked job of it. I think they should have like dummies of Trudeau and hang them and burn them. But, I'm old-fashioned, I suppose. Check out the Navy's powerful nuclear security train. That's what the truckers need, one of those suckers. Again, they use this to transport missiles. Because if they have an accident, it's all over for the nuclear industry, right? Because everybody got a camera today. Everybody. First thing you can do now is something stupid public because everybody's got their camera out, like a quick draw. In the old West, everybody used a gun. Now it's the camera, right? Gotcha. Dead scary, terrifying nuke map reveals danger zones. A nuke bomb drops on you. And that's a great idea. We covered a lot of these in the last couple of weeks. The nuke map is where you go in, punch in your place, your city or whatever, and put in a kiloton, like Hiroshima was a 15 kiloton. uranium bomb, and Fat Man was the plutonium bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Everything possible casualties to radioactive fallout. The radioactive fallout covers the whole planet. I showed you a lot of that earlier. Urges Stalin to oppose, this is in India, I think. They arrested 9,000 people in India protesting a nuclear power plant after Fukushima and charged them with sedition. They're still waiting to go to trial today. Justin Trudeau is doing the same thing today, right? Urges Stalin to oppose proposal to construct a nuclear waste storage facility. They want to use a gold mine or something to put their nuclear waste in. Already the plan to construct a nuclear waste facility was stopped after people from the region protested, and when plans were drafted to utilize the unused gold mines as deep geological repositories, it was halted after people's protests. The world's largest tokamak just crushed a record for nuclear fusion. And that's from Popular Mechanics by Caroline Dilbert. And I don't really hate many people, but I hate her. And I hate her a lot. I hate her like an ex-wife. Require an enormous amount of energy. Not that I hate any of my exes, actually. I was trying to be funny, but require an enormous amount of energy to get up to operational speed. First off, you don't know, because these are all just fantasies. In fact, we covered the story last week where they claim they reached their goal for 1/300 billionth of a second. They produced excess energy, enough for a 9-volt battery like your smoke alarm. Well, first off, the friggin' thing's got to hit 150 million degrees. And they're going to claim for 1/300 billionth of a second, we produce more power than we put into it. And it was equal to a 9-volt battery, Data. And, like, you got to get on psychotic drugs or something because you're a lunatic. You can't extract that you had a 9-volt extra amount of power in 1/300 billionth of a second. Because these are mostly private firms. And JET is part of the Culham Centre for Fusion Energy, just outside of Oxford in England. And the centre is the National Laboratory for Nuclear Fusion Research in the United Kingdom, previously known as IAEA Culham, after the UK Atomic Energy Authorities. I'm only laughing because there is no UK Atomic Energy Authorities. There is no such thing. Like, they have these fables, but they don't physically moderate or check things. They don't actually do what they claim. It's controlled opposition is all it is, right? So somebody else don't start a real one up and actually go check. They're revolting a lot, these bunch. Uranium Energy Corp sent out a letter to the shareholders, publicly, of course. 2022 begins with the highest uranium price in a decade. Yeah, it was artificially inflated by a company in Toronto last year who bought up the physical stocks. And that artificially, then they claimed that, look, uranium prices are rising, buy our shares. And so people bought in the shares, like they've been doing for 10 years. They trick them, different ways of tricking them. And then within 2 or 3 days, the shares dive because they were artificially inflated. And the pensioners lose their entire life savings. The nuclear industry walks away counting the money going, yeah, that was pretty good. What are we going to do next week? The Globe and Mail does it 3 times a week for over a decade. Where stocks were diving, uranium, Globe and Mail were like, buy. It's 3 times a week. Remember that time I called him up? Yes, the good days, boy. We believe the outlook has never been brighter for the nuclear energy. And they always got to use these stupid cliches. It's normal though, right? The U.S. devastated the Marshall Islands, is now refusing to aid the Marshallese people. And the Marshallese their islands were covered in radioactive fallout that you could actually see. And the numbers were staggering, were terrifying, were just gut-wrenching numbers. And they were used as human guinea pigs and been studied now for generations. And in fact, the Castle Bravo, which is the depiction right here, was equal to 1,000 plus Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. That's a nuclear war. And that's the same fallout as a nuclear war. And in fact, the Marshall Islands is over 1 million square kilometers is today in a study from 2019, I think. I know you're there somewhere, where you too? Where is that study to? Yeah, 2019 study. So that's the study, you can go read it. It's by all those people. You see all those people? They went there and they looked at the numbers. It was extending over 1 million square kilometers. A huge swath of land, contaminated a huge swath of land. Not with dirt, but with radioactive fallout. The mushroom cloud created by the Castle Bravo nuclear test on the Bikini Atoll. There's that picture right there. The Castle Bravo test ignited a 4-mile wide fireball, vaporized entire islands, and they say contaminated more than 7,000 square miles of the ocean and spread radioactive fallout across continents. But as I showed you, a new study in 2019 showed over 1 million square kilometers. It's disgusting. This is a funny one. France's investment, you got him there sniffing his finger. France's investment in nuclear shows they got their mojo back. Yeah, they waited till the very last second. Like, no. Okay, we're in. Because that's what happened, right? Super furry animals call out the EDF for dumping nuclear mud in Severn estuary in the United Kingdom. So this is a really popular band. They dug in, put their shoulder down, and they're bucking back against the nuclear industry. It's been nice knowing you guys. Nuclear industry will eat you guys for breakfast if you don't get up to speed. But they're trying, and they're going to court too. They're taking the nuclear industry to court to try to get them to stop dumping hundreds of thousands of tons. We've covered the story many times over the last number of years. So super happy these guys are making a stand. It takes a lot of guts to come out and go after the nuclear industry. It really does, right? Especially if you're a band trying to make a living. The Cardiff Rockers have also requested the Marine Management Organization revoke the license and they grant it to EDF, which is France's, the degenerate France nuclear industry. It's this government in France is the EDF. Back in 2018, EDF was the subject of a controversy after environmental activists, Real Good Humans, aka Real Good Humans, took the energy company to court in an effort to stop 300,000 tons of nuclear mud from a Somerset power station from being dumped outside of Cardiff. Now, we've covered all of these stories, of course, over the years. And there's no opposition. So Wonder Bars, super furry animals, have taken up the cause. And on February the 12th, the rock group wrote, "We call on the MMO to stop the EDF nuclear mud dumping." Well, like, they could probably beat up everybody in EDF. All you gotta just go there and go, boo! And everybody in the EDF will excrete into their pants. And they'll dig it out of their pants. They'll wipe it all over themselves, because that's what the nuclear industry does when they're confronted. "I'm too ugly, leave me alone." Dredged sediment from Hinkley Point C, which is surrounded by farms also, by the way. Right? Hinkley Point is surrounded by farms. And everybody who eats that stuff from those farms is going to get sick and die. And there's around 1,800 illnesses, not just cancer. Heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. And if your pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline glands start sucking up radiation, so your thyroid gland sucks up radiation, it supplies the pituitary gland, because it's creating radioactive hormones. And you're in a world of hurt now, particularly young couples and children, well, anybody. And this affects all the insects, the birds, the mammals, the animals, not just humans. The musician come activist, no, musicians with a moral compass, has now launched a campaign to save the Severn estuary. You can't call them just, see, they label you an activist, and a lot of people will switch off. But these people have a moral high ground, and they understand that. They've raised £25,000 so far. And there's a lot more dredging going on. And they're hoping to drag them into court. They need to raise $60,000 to cover the cost of legal action, because they're dragging them to court. They're going to court. Which, if even if they don't win, who cares? They made a big fuss out of it, and the industry can't handle any criticism. Look how much I'm censored. China, Rolls-Royce, and a floating power plant. Small nuclear reactors will be the future. So we hear this narrative, but it's simply not true. Japan should address wastewater concerns. First off, the tanks are empty. The water they're talking about is over 2.2 sieverts of beta. They're not even counting gamma, alpha, or neutrons like uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium. Not only that, we counted the tanks. There's not 1,000 or 750, so they're perpetual liars. They had 1,000 in 2013, allegedly. They had 1,200 in 2014, 900 in 2017, 1,000 in 2019, 1,000 in 2021, and 1,000 in 2022. So they didn't fill up any tanks since 2013 is what they're saying. But we know the filtration, the Riva system, which was France's water filtration system, and the ALP system wasn't functional at the end of 2014. And you can go through my playlist about the tanks, and you'll see we covered entire presentations just on the playlist. Lacey received $160,000 for Oyster Creek planning. What's it like? What are you going to do? And because Oyster Creek is closed down, right? So they gave him $160,000 so the community can come up with some solutions. Yeah, no. Thank you. We're almost through this. Now available new IAEA publication on assessments of cancer risk from occupational exposure. First off, if you believe a single word the IAEA tells you, you are going to get hurt, and your children and your friends and your families and your loved ones and your planet. These are degenerate scumbags, okay? Not maybe, not perhaps, not almost, but 100% unequivocally. Radiation dose management market revenue to cross 646 million by 2028, says somebody who got a lot of stocks in this. Radiation dose management market. Of course, they claim nobody ever got a dose that's harmful, Dana. I'm not going to say it to my face, of course, because that won't work out very good for him. Mars trip can be reduced to just 45 days using laser propulsion system, not dirty scumbag nuclear. Gee, that's interesting. In the Netherlands have introduced the idea of using a laser thermal propulsion system. Oh, wait, what? They're going to need nuclear power that to reduce transit time. 45 days they can get off the planet and be somewhere else. I'm not liking that at all. As China thrives in the post 911. 911. You know, Dana, they didn't find no plane at the Pentagon, no plane in Pennsylvania. But if you go look for videos of no planes, you'll find the Twin Towers. They won't mention the word Pentagon. Right? They took over the narrative and switched it to the Twin Towers. And people will fight with you to the death that there's no planes at the Twin Towers. That's not the point of what I'm saying. There's no planes at the Pentagon. Right? So they took that narrative and blew it over there. In the wake of the 911 terrorist attack, which was done themselves by some bizarre weapon. It wasn't quite a directed energy weapon. But it was in that category. Like, please don't let your loved ones go to food bar. And for Groshi there, remember, he'll sniff your bicycle seat if you're not paying attention, or your children's bicycle seat. And that's what they do. That's what the nuclear industry does. They have a super long history of sniffing bicycle seats, usually after they kill the people that are on it. There you go. That's it. That's all she got. That's what she wrote. Let me see what we got going on here. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Costs us very little. Doesn't go anywhere but makes me feel better. If that helps. Let's close the poll down, I suppose. 90% of Fukushima, which is a community right alongside the nuclear meltdowns, is too radioactive to live in. And so they're going to move people in. They want people to move into 10%. And then when you leave, you can't stop. You can't cross the street while you're there. You got to stay right in your little compound. You can't breathe the air either because they're claiming radiation doesn't go into the cleanup zone. And it's just wrong. It's on an evil scale, by the way. It's just wrong. And they're only doing that to try to give nuclear facelift. They don't care about humans. And they demonstrated that all day, every day, in every story I ever does. And we cover thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of stories each year. We've never caught them telling the truth. Ever. How's that work? It's the strangest thing imaginable. And we just went probably 2 hours, did we? And I spent 2 hours showing you the lies from the last 24 hours. You still can't do it justice, though, because you tell so many lies. I can't possibly cover all the lies in a cycle, 24-hour cycle. Because every story is multiple lies. And you're just like, oh my God, not another lie. But you're looking for all these patterns. And so over the years, we discover all of these weird patterns. And so we know what we do. We have an ethical, moral high ground. And we got 15%. Wow. So they're here spamming me. Look at that. They're here spamming me with yes votes. The nuclear industry is. That's how petty they actually are. I'm going to go up to the top of the comments, whatever's, because you can see, that's as far as I can go back in my comments. James, Megan, Patrick, James Lucid, thanks again, James. Donated 60 last night. That's a big deal. And we appreciate it. Albert, Katja. Good night, everybody. Bitterly cold here today. Tonight is even worse. I finally had to turn some heat on. I couldn't take it anymore. Chelsea. Robert. It took like 2 hours to heat the studio up tonight. Cody. I missed Cody last time. I noticed when I was reading comments after. Jade. Yeah, CANDU reactors are dirty, man. The amount of radiation coming out of the fuel pools there is the same as any other fuel pool. Peaceware, Darlene, Diana Wolf, Ella. Good night, everybody. Bit of a long day getting all this together, and then 2 hours is done. I gotta get ready for tomorrow. Wipe the slate and get at it again. Like it's an absurd amount of work. So much work. Quite proud to have the privilege to do it. I wouldn't have it any other way, to tell you the truth. Because so many lawyers for so long, I don't have any illusions. I don't live in a fantasy at all. I know how hideously evil the nuclear industry is. Centrifugal. Well, yeah, no, the video's always here. There's nothing I can do for the other side of the planet. John, I'm sorry, man. You gotta realize how much work it takes to do it, and then do the show. Then the video is always sitting there, so people can watch it whenever they get a chance, right? I can only do so much. I'm literally ran into the ground. I've been at this for so many years, and I do so much. Dog Bolux, Patrick. I hear you, man. I'm doing the best I can. Port Angeles. Dana Nasana. Hi, Dana. Richard. Yes, like I'm lost in. I'm overloaded with work. I am like literally overloaded. I don't stop, and I wish I had enough funding, real funding, regular funding, that I can go my potential, because I could, trust me, if somebody set me free, I'd eat this industry in short order. Had the ability to hire people and fund an operation, not worry about expenses and bills, and do the research. I can destroy the industry in less than a year, I bet you. Takes a lot of money, though, see, to pull it off, right? Blue Jay. Bragging about 32 degrees, eh? Yeah, dirty rat. I'm here freezing -17. You're talking 32. Huh. Thinker. Did I get everybody? Colette S. You're welcome. Hi, Colette. I read the comments after. Thank you, James. Do I got everybody? I think so. Yeah, no, I hear you, John. I'll think about what you're saying, see if I can. But like, cause I run my show at the same time, is because it's late at night where I'm to. There's no background noises. No one's gonna be knocking on the doors, etc., etc. Right? I go to sleep right after this, and I'm exhausted. It takes all day, all evening, and most of the night. Usually get an hour, half an hour before the show goes live. Brush my teeth and shit. Magic Mushroom Prophet. Thank you, my friend. My voice is shot here tonight. See everybody. Last show tomorrow night. It's been a grueling week, eh? Hard shows, man. So much information. I just wish there was more hours in the day. If there was more hours in the day, I can make this work. But you need 40-hour days to keep up with nuclear is the problem. Hugs for everybody. See everybody tomorrow. Have a great night. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Have a great day tomorrow, folks. Take care.